The grand dining hall stretched out before me like a frozen lake trapped beneath a cracked winter sky, immense and unwelcoming. Towering stained glass windows, painted with the crimson and gold of the house's proud crest, filtered the early morning sun into fractured shards of kaleidoscopic light. Those jagged beams splintered across the polished oak tables, bathing the gleaming fine china and silver cutlery in a mocking brilliance. I sat rigidly in my carved chair, the lacquered wood cold beneath my fingertips. Courteous as icy daggers, thanks for the warm welcome, I thought bitterly, curling the corners of my lips into a tight, forced smile. It was a smile that barely contained the storm of fury and exile swirling within. Every cut glance landed like a frostbite kiss, every whispered murmur a venomous barb. Around me, the nobles sat statuesque, as if sculpted from cold, unyielding marble, unblinking eyes pale and sharp as hawks, lips pressed thin into lines of solemn disapproval. Their faces were masks, pale canvases painted with disdain and cold calculation. The heavy velvet drapes drooped silently, swallowing the corners of the great hall, as if trying to smother any spark of warmth. The air was stale and oppressive, thick enough to swallow hopes whole. Only the faintest sounds dared break the tension. The sharp clinking of spoons, cautiously scraping porcelain, nervous shuffles of silk gowns and tailored trousers against the floor, and somewhere, veiled beyond the curtains, the mournful plucking of a harpsichord weaving a melancholy lullaby. The music seemed a requiem, a soundtrack to my social death sentence. A slim figure across the table leaned forward, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. His voice slithered through the silence, honeyed with insult. "You're still clinging to that fragile hope, aren't you?" The barb was soft but laced with venom, like a dagger dipped in poison. I caught the glance, fleeting, a blend of mock pity and cold disdain. Under the damask tablecloth, my fingers curled tightly, knuckles blanching, but my expression remained neutral, eyes steady. Fragile hope, I seethed inwardly. If only they knew how much iron it takes to survive in the world they built. Beside me, a sharp voice sliced the air, a family member, no doubt. It was colder than winter's breath, edged with the steely certainty of judgment. "You'd do well to remember your place." My heart thudded uneasily at the words, but my face betrayed nothing. I lifted my chin deliberately, each breath steady and measured, swallowing back the retort that snarled at my tongue's edge. "Remember my place," I mused silently. "It's the edge of a blade, and I'm still the one clutching it." Suddenly, a low rattle broke the delicate balance. The light clang of cutlery struck against the table by a restless hand. Nervous energy leaked through the polished veneer. My eyes snapped toward the grand entrance, every nerve taut, the muscles in my body ready to spring. Footsteps echoed in deliberate, measured cadence, approaching steadily through the marble hall. I exhaled slowly, a quiet prayer to calm the storm pounding in my chest. This was their game, a ritual of cold formality ruled by unyielding codes. The noble code of conduct demanded steel hearts and weaponized politeness. Any faltering emotion was a crack in the armor, a mark of weakness that carried a social death sentence scarier than any whispered scandal. Here, to show vulnerability was not merely risky, it was fatal. Later, once the oppressive feast had loosened into uneasy silence, I slipped away from the grandeur and into shadows, following the narrow servant corridors behind the main hall. The halls here were claustrophobic, lit only by flickering candle sconces, whose flames danced like ghosts, threatening to gutter out at any breath of air. Dust hung thick in slender streams that caught the candlelight and turned it dull, like smoke. The stale scent of cold stone and neglected corners clung heavily to the air. Focus. Steady your breath. My heart hammered like a war drum beneath my ribs as I pressed against the rough, cold stone wall. Every footstep sounded aloud in my ears as I crept forward like a ghost, soft, cautious, invisible. From the murky silence, whispered voices slipped out, low and conspiratorial,
the unmistakable cadence of plotting threading between formality and malice, like a noose tightening wind. When she falters at the ball, her reputation will be shattered eternally, one voice hissed. The words dripped with cruel satisfaction. A pause, then another voice, sharp and careless, like a blade sliding between ribs. The Duchess has already signed off. Only a matter of time. I felt a bitter smile twitch behind clenched teeth, as if they've edited out the part where I'm still alive and plotting, I thought darkly. I could feel their confidence, a blinding arrogance that blinded them to my presence. My jaw locked tight, every muscle a coiled spring. To the outside, silence, but inside, a flame was sparked, a quiet blaze of resolution kindling beneath layers of injury. My fingers lightly tapped against the stone wall, the faintest noise breaking the tense quiet, but I did not care. Breath shallow, I receded silently into deeper shadows, careful not to betray even the flicker of my existence. This was their mistake, their assumption of my fragility, their hubris. It was their weakness, the spark I would feed into a growing blaze of revenge. Night fell over the manor like a thick, suffocating blanket, muffling even the distant sounds of revelry preparations. In my secret refuge, the dusty attic's chamber, I convened with my only true ally, magic. The room stretched out dim and cramped, heavy with the smell of old parchment and the musk of rotted wood. Dust motes danced on the faint blue glow from a handful of flickering candles, battling the stale air. Ancient tomes lay scattered across a cluttered desk and the floor, pages yellowed and etched with arcane knowledge forgotten by most. Etched symbols glowed faintly on the cracked plaster walls, whispering secrets from long ago. I sat cross-legged, trembling fingers tracing the delicate lines of a brittle scroll before me. The intricate rune patterns were an elegant dance of power. Every curve and intersection a conduit to the elemental forces that awaited my command. My breath faltered, a moment's hesitation in the silence. Shoulders stiff, I drew in a deep, controlled sigh. Pulse thrumming like thunder in my veins, I extended my palm and willed mana to flow. A fragile spark ignited, bright and ephemeral, flickering like an unborn star before sputtering into nothing. Magic won't fix my social status, I muttered bitterly to myself, but it might save my skin. A faint chime echoed softly in my mind, a spectral UI only I could hear. Skill learned, basic rune conjuration, level 1. Mana, 80 of 100. A flush of frustration burned behind my eyes. Beads of sweat trickled down my temple, and I wiped them away with the back of a trembling hand. Setting the scroll anew, I resumed my focus, determination hardening like tempered steel with every failed attempt. There was no room for doubt here. Failure wasn't just defeat, it was death. Later still, as shadows grew thick and swallowed the long corridors lined with opulent but silent tapestries, I crossed paths with a figure whose presence felt less accidental and more inevitable. He emerged from the dimness like a shade given form, steps never louder than a whisper on the cold stone floor. The subtle scent of sandalwood clung to him, warm, mystical, a stark contrast to the chilling silence that wrapped the corridor like a shroud. His eyes gleamed with quiet secrets, the kind learned in half-truths and long silences. "Power is a double-edged sword," he said softly, voice smooth and deliberate, like silk wrapped in steel. His words hung heavy in the still air. Not all who wield it can trust their own reflection. I instinctively placed a hand on the hidden dagger beneath my cloak, fingers tightening around the familiar hilt, and my gaze sharpened into a wary slit. "Forgive me if I'm wary of shadows offering guidance," I responded, voice low and cautious, eyes flickering up to meet his. A faint, knowing smile curved his lips, half amusement, half sorrow. "Then let the light in your heart be your judgment," he offered quietly, bowing his head in a gesture that was both respectful and cryptic. We shared a lingering look, heavy with unspoken understanding. Trust was a rare coin in this house of knives, a currency I could ill afford to spend frivolously. Yet something about him, the quiet strength, the shadows behind his gaze, made the walls around my heart tremble, as if a crack had appeared in my defenses.
Back in the solitude of my private chamber, the manor beyond hummed with muted preparations for the approaching grand ball, a night destined to decide fates and shatter reputations. Candlelight flickered gently, painting dancing shadows across the room's ornate surfaces. My eyes were drawn to the large mirror hanging on the far wall, its surface alive with subtle ripples of woven magic, shimmering softly like water disturbed by a single drop. The air felt thick, pulsing faintly with the weight of impending destiny. I closed my fingers tightly around the small talisman hidden deep in my pocket, a delicate trinket that pulsed faintly, weak but undeniably alive. Its light beat in time with my racing heart, a heartbeat that had shifted from panic to fierce determination. If my downfall is the script, then I will be the author, I whispered to the darkness, voice barely more than a breath, but steady as steel. Inside me, a roaring blaze erupted, quiet but unyielding. No more waiting for the trap to snap shut. That ends now. The mirror reflected back the faint glow of magic swirling within its depths, a silent promise of battles yet to come. I met my own eyes in that shimmering surface, no longer the hunted, but a player ready to strike. With a slow, deliberate nod, I drew in a steadying breath and rose. My footsteps echoed with absolute purpose as I left the chamber behind me. The game was dangerous. The players were deadly. But this time, I would not be the pawn. I was ready to take my first steps into a perilous new world and to seize control of a fate that had sought to bind me.